so much for all being here. It's a real treat to see so many people early in the day. So yeah, welcome to the conference, as Robbie said. Over the day, we'll be hearing from residents, health campaigners, activists, artists, academics, and more who are resisting corporate advertising and finding solutions to its dominance over our mind and our culture. So try and look beyond consumerism and come together and plan and plot and question the role of advertising in today's world. And yeah, it's great to have so many of you with us. So in this session, we're going to be looking particularly at a really dangerous, pernicious form of advertising that I'm sure you're all really familiar with and have heard lots about, greenwashing. We're living in a golden age of greenwash, people have said, and we'll be talking about why is this a problem and what can we all individually and collectively do about it. So I'm Veronica. I work with Adfree Cities and Badvertising. Today I'm here on a Badvertising day. And we are a campaign organised by the Nierwetberg Institute to stop adverts fueling the climate emergency. So we see a lot of ads for airlines, we see a lot of ads for SUV cars, fossil fuel companies, and we also hear simultaneously that we're in a climate emergency. So what Badvertising is doing is questioning the role of high carbon advertising or fossil advertising in that context. And I'm sure lots of us here have experienced a kind of cognitive dissonance hearing on the radio in the morning about climate emergency or the IPCC report, and then walking past an airline advert later in the day. It seems kind of bizarre and uncomfortable. But we ended tobacco advertising when we knew that there was a massive public health problem associated with smoking. So we know that we can do something about advertising that is causing social and environmental harms. So there's positive action happening around the world. In France, we've had car adverts now have to have a tagline that says, like, have you considered walking or cycling or using a cleaner transport option? And that's great. That's a really good step. That's the kind of place we want to be getting to. In The Hague, there are bans on fossil adverts, and we've also seen some councils in the UK adopt a ban on fossil advertising in their local authorities. So we've had that in Norwich, we've also had it in North Somerset and Liverpool, and those places are soon to be implementing those policies. So you won't be able to see an advert for an SUV as you get the bus on your way to work in the morning. So yeah, those are some of the things that Badvertising does. We work with local councils and authorities and also major sporting events to ban fossil adverts from appearing. We also, what else do? We've reduced kind of policy toolkits and resources and reports of building a really strong evidence base that advertising does drive up sales for SUVs, it does drive up sales for airlines. And we work with the regulators to try and tackle adverts that are particularly harmful, particularly ads that are really, really greenwashing. We've seen a lot more greenwashing lately. Maybe people here have noticed that. Greenwashing seems to have been going a surge. It's probably because a lot of industries are on the defensive, and we'll come to talk about that in a bit. Badvertising also does a bit of parliamentary lobbying. We have a kind of mostly one-way line of communication with I always forget what the name is, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So that's us versus Nadine Dorries at the moment. Which, as you can imagine, is having mixed results. And yeah, our work with the advertising regulator, as I mentioned, has been focusing more and more on greenwash as we see more big polluters pour multi-million pounds worth of money into PR campaigns to kind of distract, deflect, and eventually delay any real action on climate. And that's why we see corporate greenwash as a real issue. So both our speakers today, Anna and Svenja, we'll be showcasing case studies of two major industries, finance and fashion, to illustrate how greenwash distracts us and deflects attention away from the real true nature of what corporations are up to. Greenwash advertising shows us something shiny and makes us look the other way. It's a kind of sparkly smokescreen for environmentally and socially harmful practices. And what we also are interested in advertising in Adfree Cities is the role of advertising agencies in that, broking that deal in making these advertising campaigns that are paid for by big polluters and kind of maintaining that massive gap between what we see around us online, wherever we see kind of the public face of these companies, and what's actually happening in reality, kind of allowing the business as usual wheel to just keep turning. Cool, I've probably talked for almost long enough. Yeah, we will be seeing some good examples. Corporate greenwash comes in a lot of weird shapes and sizes, just from Shell, who recently made some, what, £9 billion in their last profit report. We've seen Shell sponsored kind of Make the Future festivals, where they get celebrities to sing songs about clean energy, which includes clean natural gas, which is not a thing. We've seen children's climate fun fairs, where you can do a pedal-powered coffee machine. We've seen Shell sponsor carbon-neutral petrol, also not a thing. And also London buses fueled on coffee. That was a really big, really worldwide advertising campaign that then was mothballed a couple of years later. So introduce our speakers. We're going to hear from Svenja Nierwetberg from Fossil Free London, who works on big banks and their greenwash spin and has been actively involved in Fossil Free London's amazingly creative campaign against Barclays for over a year, and is also studying a PhD in neuroscience alongside. And Anna Bryher, who is advocacy lead from Labour Behind the Label. Labour Behind the Label campaigns for garment workers' rights around the world. And in recent years, the campaign has done some really cool creative subvertising actions against Boohoo, Primark, and many more. Right, and I'll pass over now to Anna.
Great, so I'm going to talk about fashion greenwashing. First of all, I'm just going to say a quick bit about what Labour Behind the Label is. We're a campaign group who works alongside unions and garment workers' rights groups and women in garment-producing countries who are trying to fight for their rights. So we try to take their demands and amplify it to brands and finance in retail countries. So trying to support their demands and get their concerns heard. Fight for better wages and union rights. I'm going to start by just quickly saying a few things about, this is my slide of bad, about why the fashion industry and all of the greenwashing that kind of comes along with it is really damaging for people and for planet. So the fashion industry is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions, which is more than international flights and maritime shipping combined, which I think is an important fact. Let's just take that in. By 2050, it's set to use 25% of the carbon budget associated with the 2% global pathway. So a quarter of our carbon budget, if we're going to stay on 2%, could be used by fashion, which is absolutely ridiculous. So the fashion industry really is one of the big polluters when we think about the change that we need to see in order to keep within our planetary limits. At all levels, it's destructive. So if you're looking at cotton or weaving or dyeing or bleaching, factory assembly, which is where I do a lot of work on like workers' rights, but shipping, retail, and then disposal of fast fashion, it's really damaging the planet and its people. So the woman in the bottom right-hand corner, she's from Indonesia. The sign she's holding up says "Textile Waste Kills," and she lives along the banks of the Citram River in Indonesia, where there are 9 million people in the slums of West Java who have had their water source poisoned by textile factories dumping chemicals into the river further upstream. And then if you look at top right, the Aral Sea, which is near Kyrgyzstan, in the Stans. That's picture in 1970, and that's picture 2015, which is the water having been used for cotton production with lots of cotton plantations on the shores just been drained. That whole sea has just been drained by what's been happening. Production of T-shirts, 2,700 litres of water are used, which is enough drinking water for 2.5 years for one person to make one T-shirt. So the water that is used in cotton production is absolutely ridiculous. And then if we think about the workers' rights implications, workers are paid less than a third of a living wage on average in loads of garment-producing countries. So that's the equivalent of if the UK living wage is £9.90, people being paid £3.30 an hour, or on a regular basis. That's how it is. And then finally, textile waste. 92 million tonnes of textile waste are created by the fashion industry each year, which is one truckful of clothes being dumped every second. So much clothing is made. We've just got all this stuff that we buy and we buy and we buy, and it's really damaging people and the planet. So that was a whistle-stop tour of the bad, right? But what why is this being driven by companies? What is it that they're trying to get across to people? Well, firstly, because it makes money. And, you know, we've seen year on year this increase in the way that consumers buy, going from buying, you know, a few things and keeping them in their wardrobe to trends used to be every season, and then every week, and now every day. You know, brands like Boohoo who float like, you know, 2,000 styles a week online to you're saying, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. So it's ever increasing how we buy. And then there's a recent survey by Deloitte. Sorry, the good news is that people are starting to care. So people do care. And a recent survey by Deloitte found out that 32% of consumers say that they're engaged with adopting more sustainable lifestyles. But importantly, Gen Z, fashion's main consumer targets, are care more about sustainable behaviours than others. So 50% of Gen Z interviewees said that they reduced how much that they buy in recent years, and 45%, important statistic, stopped purchasing certain brands because of ethical or sustainability concerns. So the big fashion brands are looking at this and going, okay, people are stopping buying if they think that there is a barrier to us being ethical. So and then the top 5 things that they say that they care about are waste reduction, carbon footprint, providing sustainable packaging, being committed to work practices, and respecting human rights. And in terms of how expensive each of those things are, packaging is the thing that often brands feel like they're able to do something about. So the Primark paper bag, I think, is a really interesting case in point, because they have a whole load of problems that are happening across their supply chain in terms of their business model and how they're driving negative impacts for the planet and for people by how they produce their clothing. But what they have changed is their plastic to paper, and they've got this lovely little Primark Cares logo, which I don't know whether you've seen anywhere, but it's really light touch greenwash of just like that they've put everywhere, this little Primark Cares, Primark Cares, Primark Cares on their paper bag, on a few labels, without particularly backing it up. And the introduction of bring back secondhand clothing bins in their stores. So there's quite a lot of that. Okay, we're going to collect up waste clothing so you can see that we're being ethical, you know. And so it's signalling to consumers, oh, we're doing something about this, but actually, okay. And then we're going to move on to that. I'm going to play you a quick video. So how do I do this? This one? Yeah, that one. Okay, got it. Yeah, nice. Okay, this is Primark greenwashing. Ooh.
Not one use. My one love. My longest relationship. Not causing harm. Causing joy. Not priced out. Priced in. Real change doesn't have to come with high prices. High prices will not keep us out anymore. We are in on it. All of us. Him, her, them. Okay, him too. We will do more. Our clothes will be recyclable by design by 2027. We will do less. Carbon emissions halved by 2030. We will do better. All the cotton in our clothing will be recycled, organic, or sourced from our sustainable cotton programme by 2027. Standing as one, looking as many. This is how change really looks.
Yes. So, I mean, on first glance, that looks like Primark are doing some things. They've got 3 commitments there. Where's my list? Recyclability, halving cotton emissions, sourcing cotton sustainably. But I guess cynically, if I look at that, halving carbon emissions, it's about their core business rather than their supply chain. So how that works is, you know, they've outsourced basically the majority of their damaging impact around the world to global south nations, and halving their carbon emissions in stores and in their head office probably is, something to be done, but it's not a huge impact, because actually the real impact of what's really happening is in the supply chain. Recyclability, saying that something is recyclable doesn't actually mean that it will get recycled. So cotton, for example, is recyclable. Polyester is recyclable, but the commitment doesn't actually lead to the outcome. And then the final thing is saying that they're going to source from their sustainable cotton program, that it could be organic, or mostly will be sourced from their own sustainable cotton program, which they have created themselves and defined their own set of standards around what that really looks like. So, what we see often with greenwash, and I think this is an interesting case study, is brands creating their own terms or own overarching ideas of like what sustainability is, and managing to bamboozle people with kind of nice glib terms, or if you don't know about the actual detail of what's really going on. These are some women in Bangladesh during the pandemic, when everything stopped and all the clothes, the factories shut. There were, $12 billion worth of income was denied to garment workers globally. So when Primark when they stopped sourcing, they stopped paying their workers, and then a lot of factories shut down and loads of people were owed loads of money, because the impact gets passed on and on and on down supply chains. So what have we been doing about it? Well, Labour Behind the Label has been taking on Primark for quite a long time. Top left was some action that we did during the pandemic, stickering loads of different Primark stores, asking them whether they had paid their workers and what they were going to do about the fact that the orders stopping meant that workers were being forced into poverty. My favourite Primark action that Labour Behind the Label ever did was with the Reverend Billy and the Church of Stop Shopping. I don't know whether any of you ever heard of them, but they're incredible. Oh, did you? Yeah, incredible, great. He came to Primark in the Primark opening in Bristol, which at the time was the biggest Primark in Europe when they did open it. And we did a big exorcism outside the new Primark store, where he cast out the demons of consumerism, and the choir all sang. And then we went into did a phone chorus as well, going in, where everybody went in on their phones going, yeah, I've heard Primark, yeah, uses child labour, I'm not really sure about that, minimum wage, difficult. And then got louder and louder, so people shouting, yeah, Primark, ruining the planet, destroying workers' rights. And then Reverend Billy kind of came out of the changing rooms with his big megaphone, preaching to the consumers, asking them to change their ways. Anyway, that was a fun thing that we did. But we've also, taken concerns to Primark's AGM. This is us getting some workers who went to go and ask a question at Primark AGM. A number of other things. Oh gosh, have I run out of time? Okay, I'll do this really quickly. Ultra fast fashion. So, Primark is a good example of brands who are on the high street, but increasingly we're seeing people buying stuff online. That actually there's this new wave of fashion companies. Boohoo, I saw it first. Quiz, loads of Shein, loads of kind of online-only retail brands who are particularly targeting young audiences and making people buy new trend all the time. And they don't have any advertising, really, that is saying we care, because I think they've just assumed that won't really work. But we've been doing a lot of stuff to try and actually call out their advertising that does say you can have it all, you can buy what you want, and it will be really great. Particularly during lockdown, we put out a report about Boohoo factories in Leicester paying £3.50 an hour, and we worked with lots of journalists on trying to kind of call out some of the production models that were in Boohoo's supply chain. Particularly looking at how transparency is really important. So the main aim of that campaign was to try and get Boohoo to publish where they make their stuff, because it was this kind of thousands of factories hidden all around the world thing, whereas quite a lot of brands do put out this is where our factories are, and lists about it. And transparency is good practice. So, because what you can change. So we did this Advertising campaign where we got I've forgotten who the artist was who made this for us, but he was really brilliant and did this great Boohoo Won't Tell Us Where You Make Your Clothes poster. And so we posted it up near Boohoo's offices on loads of the boards. And then we also, because their advertising is mostly online, we tried doing like some Twitter, just social media, what's it called? Onslaughts, where like over Black Friday, we got thousands and thousands of images and tried to get them posted in as many places as possible to try and make some sort of dent on their hashtag, which kind of worked and kind of didn't, because Boohoo were posting like also that much all the time. So actually trying to kind of make a dent in that space on social media was an interesting learning for us. But we did make loads and loads of these images with Boohoo models with little speech bubbles telling the truth about what's happening in their supply chain. And we did petitions and blah, 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 other things. Okay, yeah, and I just want to say a few things about how you can get involved with Label Behind the Label if you're interested. I like to say importantly when I give a talk about where I think our power is. Because quite often a lot of, fashion campaigns and stuff say, oh, you should just buy them from ethical brands and do this and do this. But we believe really strongly that our power is to be a citizen rather than to be a consumer. Or you can be a consumer, but your consumerism will make a small dent in a behemoth. But being a citizen, your small voice can join with others and really make a difference to tell brands that change is needed. So yeah, our power is to be citizens, not to be consumers. Our power is to tell the truth. We've got lots of resources that help people ask questions in shops and start conversations with brands about where their stuff comes from. You can sign petitions and stuff on our website and act now, skill up and join the struggle. We also have a WhatsApp group for organising people in various cities to go out and do like sticker actions and poster actions, and to be a kind of a Reddit crew who goes and jumps on a particular post that where a brand has said something that we don't agree with, and you can all comment, or some of them are quite easy little online things that you can do. So if you're interested, you can join that. Thank you.
Okay, so slide switch in topic. I'm going to talk about why banks are fueling the climate crisis. And as Veronica has mentioned earlier, I'm, like 6 months into this topic expert. So feel free to interrupt if anything is not clear. I'm more of an expert on neuroscience, really. And so I'm going to do a quick intro on like how banks and the climate crisis are connected. And it's really interesting because banks are essential to fossil fuel expansion and fossil fuel existing, because fossil fuel projects are massively expensive, like building a new gas field from inception of where you find it to like actually figuring out how much gas is there, getting the licenses. It takes about 20 years to actually see profits from that, right? So you need lots of loans, you need insurance, you need underwriting to make that happen. So legitimately, if banks started to opt out of fossil fuel companies, fossil fuel industry would have to change drastically. And the other part of the equation is interesting because banks don't really need fossil fuels, because there's obviously plenty of things you could invest in as a bank, and fossil fuels aren't even that profitable. It massively depends on the gas and oil prices. So like right now, okay, they're pretty profitable, but on the whole, over the last years, the profit margin was about 6%. And if you're like investing in any sort of, for example, real estate company, you get a lot more, you get double. So like really, it's interesting how we have that perception that fossil fuels are like the gold standard of what you want to invest in. But really it's not that profitable because it's expensive, because there's crisis, because it's also risky. So it stands to reason that banks could opt out. And especially last year was a huge year for banks declaring net zero targets. And there's this like net zero banking alliance that was formed. And like within a pretty short time, within 1 year, almost all major banks have signed up to this. Like there's about 20 major banks, many of them like in China and other Asian states that haven't. But all of the banks that we actually know have signed up to this alliance. And they all declare to be net zero by 2050. However, also last year and this year, we've seen that massively banks don't actually change anything at all. So like their actions don't match their words. These are all headlines from this year where we see that their investment in fossil fuels and other climate problematic areas has not gone down at all. So here's a mismatch. And what I do want to mention at this point is it is possible. So like there's one bank that's in the alliance, which is La Banque Postale in France. And they actually have made a commitment that by 2030, they are already not investing in new fossil fuel projects, and they will stop all investments in fossil fuel projects by 2030. And their policy on coal also seems pretty solid. I'm saying that with reference to the Banking on Climate Chaos report, because I actually didn't read their policy. But I just want to say that, you know, sometimes when you talk to people that aren't as involved, they will say, but banks have to do this, right? They're going to go bankrupt. But like, they don't. Like, you can legitimately opt out of fossil fuels and you will continue existing as a bank. So this is where it gets interesting, because obviously the fact that they all signed up to this alliance talks to the fact that they know that this is sort of a required thing right now. And like Barclays, interestingly, ironically, even have an article on their page advising their investors that you have to double check net zero pledges if you want to invest in a company, because they may not be real. And I'm like, Barclays, have you looked at yourself? So there's this definitely a will and a necessity to project a green image. And you can see that in their Twitter feed, for example. Here's Barclays saying all of the things that they support in terms of sustainability. And it's like the classic thing, right? It's a lot of like fancy technology that will save us. It's like the farming that will save us. It's like, as with all greenwashing, it's a little bit of like the magic trick where the attention's here and I'm doing something here. It's about omission. It's about what they don't say, right? So what they say is like, oh, we're supporting all these great projects, and that's like 5% of a budget, and everything else goes into shell. But that's what they don't say, right? And the same here, where like they put a lot of pressure on the consumer as well. So this is Barclays asking you, what will you make possible? And when as a consumer, obviously, your options are quite limited, and maybe you should be a citizen, as Anna mentioned. But like, as long as Barclays is funding the fossil fuel industry, we can all recycle as much as we want, and it will not make a difference, right? And here's an HBSC ad, which is also like classic greenwash, where they say climate change doesn't do borders, and they talk about how in the same campaign they talk about how they're going to plant trees and all of the great things they're going to support. And this is an interesting one, because this is the first case where the government watchdog for advertising in the UK has actually sent them a warning and has said, like, you cannot claim, like, this will make people believe that you're sustainable, but you are not. And like in the future, you will have to put on these kinds of ads, like, start saying how much you actually invest in fossil fuels. Otherwise, it is illegal. And this is a really interesting case, and this really sums up where we are right now. Because we can tell that the banks have a strong pressure to be seen as green, to be seen as like serving the community, to be seen as trustworthy and stable. And in reality, they are not. So, and attacking that gap as like campaigners, as individuals, is where our power lies right now. Like a lot of times people would say like to attack the social license. And what they mean by that is like a business can only operate on a certain level of like acceptance, ideally approval, and especially as a bank you need trust, right? People are giving you their money, so they will only do that if you're trustworthy. And attacking the social license means pushing into a direction of like boycott, pushing into a direction where people are going to question, do you actually know what you're doing? And so this is what we as a group at Fossil Fuel London are trying to do. So I'm just going to run quickly through a couple of ways that we've tried to attack the social license, specifically of Barclays, because they are Europe's biggest funder of fossil fuels. They're actually the 5th globally, which is crazy given that like there's a lot of American and Canadian banks that are like even worse. So and also Barclays is a high street bank. So they are exactly at that junction where they really want to project this image of like, oh, well, you're a nice neighbor, and they really aren't. So like, it's a lot easier to attack this gap in desired image and actual reality in a high street bank than say in like JP Morgan, or like a bank that literally does not care about individual consumers. Okay. So ways to attack the social license. This is us at the AGM in Manchester like about 2 weeks ago. So one thing, obviously, at the AGM, there's going to be shareholders. And while some of them may be like fully aware of Barclays action, like inaction on climate change, actually, some of them may not. So this is a great opportunity to get people that hold power in the company to like exert that power. And we have been liaising with other groups that have done more of the lobbying, more of other things, and it's a great action. Then another thing goes more towards the subvertising realm of like, if they have ads that like sort of lend themselves to like using their message against them and say like, this is an ad that was about like 1 month ago where they were like, wake up your money, make your money do more, that kind of stuff. So we made like a similar looking ad saying like, wake up to climate change. And we held that ad up in front of their stores. We had like social media stuff to like push people to investigate what does Barclays want us to believe, what is the actual truth. Then I think a lesson that we learned in our campaign since we started this at the end of last year is that the link between banking and climate change is quite opaque for a lot of people. Like, I think many people aren't aware that this is a major impact. So we realized that we need to do more outreach because like I remember that we did something in February and I was talking to someone on the pavement about how Barclays funds fossil fuels, and she was like, oh, but I don't have a car. And I was like, wait, what? So like that definitely drives home the point that people really don't get the link, and you have to like have very clear messaging and like really just be there to inform them, like not necessarily say like, okay, you have to now go to the CEO of Barclays and like convince him otherwise. Just like, first of all, think about it, then maybe talk about it with your friends. So this is us at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last week, because the Women's Super League is funded by Barclays and like one of those classic fossil fuels in connection to football kind of deals. And so that was the final of the Women's Super League, and we went and we had like a little goal, and we were talking and we were handing out chocolate footballs and talking to families mostly about how Barclays funds climate breakdown, essentially. And that was really great, actually. Talking to families is great. Families care about the climate more. I guess they have kids, so they need to. But like, yeah, it really drives home that just talking about it is great, because a lot of people don't make that connection. So that's very like low-key thing that everyone can do. And then lastly, yeah, is like basically jumping into the gap of like this desired image, that reputation, and trying to drive home that similar as to tobacco, we cannot allow them to launder their image to something else. And like, so we made these stickers that say Barclays kills, because essentially that's true. And we put them on ATMs, and then you can like review an ATM on Google. And you can give the ATM 1 star and say like, oh, Barclays really sucks because they're literally killing the planet. And that means that even if someone removes the sticker, the message is still out there. And also very few people actually review ATMs. So there's going to be like 2 reviews, and one of them is going to be like, oh, I didn't get my money. And the other one is like, Barclays kills the planet. So you're just going to be seeing quite a lot. So that's a very like low stakes thing to do. And yeah, so that's sort of like from the very large, from the like protest at the AGM to like talking to people to like just putting stickers everywhere. Like we're trying all the angles. And as I said, we're at a really interesting point in time, because banks are feeling the pressure. They want to project, oh, we're so green, but also they're really not. So like, it seems like we're at a tipping point here, because banks can exist without fossil fuels, and with our pressure, I think it's possible. Oh yeah, I have a last slide, I forgot. Yeah, so Fossil Free London, we have a stand in the back, some stickers, like the Barclays Kills ones, you can get some. And yeah, come talk to us.